The evil that lurks in the dark has always been there, watching, waiting. Lately, it feels like it's finally stepped forward, clawing its way into our reality. Is it technology? The surge of humanity's numbers? Or something else entirely? Perhaps it's been unleashed. What I'm about to share is true. All of it. Rena, a vital part of the fight against the Neph and other things, must know the truth. You all must. There are forces within the government battling to protect you, but there are also those working against you. Will you be ready when the darkness comes for you? It was 2009, Afghanistan. Day 2. That night, after we'd killed the beast, I had a most vivid, lucid dream. A dream that was too real to be dismissed. I was dead. I stood in a place not meant for the living. Blackness stretched infinitely in every direction, devouring any semblance of reality. The only light came from me, faint and fragile. My body didn't feel real, like it had been stripped away, leaving me floating, exposed. I ran. I screamed for help, but there was nothing. No one. Just the endless void. I collapsed, overwhelmed by the weight of eternity. That's when I felt it. The same gut-wrenching fear I'd felt in the presence of the beast we had killed. No. Please, God, no. From the abyss, the beast emerged. It looked the same, but its eyes were different. No longer yellow, but blood-red pupils burning with malice. Its gaze pierced me, a sneer curling its lips in disgust. You, it growled, its voice like rotted metal scraping against bone. You sent me to this place. You and your wretched God. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. As it loomed closer, its grotesque hand outstretched. Now that you're here, I will make you suffer for eternity. Its fingers were mere inches from my soul when a blinding flash of light erupted between us. The beast let out a guttural scream, a sound that vibrated through the void in my very being. Then, I was back, awake, drenched in sweat, gasping for air. But the dream, it wasn't a dream. I had been somewhere I should never have gone. The next day, Vasquez snored in the next room, oblivious to my turmoil. The base buzzed with the distant roar of jets, the ground trembling as shipping containers rattled. The oppressive Afghan heat rose with the sun, searing through my fire-resistant gear, turning it into a furnace. As I stepped into the Tactical Operations Center, the air fell off. Soldiers huddled around screens, murmuring about troop movements. Some sipped coffee, others looked dead on their feet. It wasn't like last night, too calm, too ordinary. They didn't know. They couldn't know. The beast wasn't gone. It was waiting. And somehow I knew it wasn't alone. They couldn't know. They wouldn't understand. What I'd seen, there was no going back from it. The weight of it pressed on me like an iron shroud. William's voice cut through my thoughts like a knife, snapping me back to the moment. He gestured for me to follow. Tall and imposing, with a slight limp that belied his reputation, Williams moved fast. Too fast for someone who'd lost most of his calf to an IED. I practically had to jog to keep up. He led me into the conference room, shutting the door behind us with an air of finality. "Sit," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "You did good work last night," he began, his gaze pinning me to the chair. "Stolen told me I can trust you." The way he said trust you made my stomach churn. There was something unsaid beneath his words, something heavy and dark. He handed my platoon to another lieutenant. I started to object, but he silenced me with a raised hand. "This isn't a punishment. You'll get a platoon eventually. For now, you're taking over the PSD team." The room seemed colder as he said it. Personal security detachment. 3 words no soldier wants to hear in the field. It's glorified babysitting, escorting high-ranking officers and politicians around while real soldiers do the fighting. "You'll also be augmenting some of the team guys while they recover," he added, his tone softer but no less cryptic. His reassurance felt hollow, like a lie wrapped in good intentions. Something about his words didn't sit right with me. Officers didn't augment team guys. That wasn't how it worked. unless something catastrophic had happened. Williams handed me a secure phone. "It's safe from the Hadjis," he said. But the way he said it made me wonder, safe from them or someone else entirely. The next month blurred into monotony and unease. 16-hour days of escorting generals and politicians, sitting in on meetings where the fate of nations was decided, dodging death in ambushes and IED attacks. I'd been shot once, just a graze, but the scar felt more like a brand, a mark of something far deeper. None of it mattered. None of it distracted me from the gnawing question. What was that thing? The beast haunted my thoughts, its voice echoing in my nightmares. The knife it left in my soul twisted with every passing day. And David, 357, the man who'd promised to explain the nightmare that first night, he was gone, vanished. Then one day, everything changed. It started with a knock on my office door. 3 men entered, 2 of them immediately out of place. They wore khakis and black polos embroidered with CBTI. Definitely not soldiers, and not CIA either. They lacked the smug arrogance of the spooks I'd dealt with. One of them stepped forward, extending his hand. "Jake," he said, removing his cap and sunglasses. He smiled a warm, disarming smile that screamed trustworthiness. He looked like the favorite uncle at every family gathering, but his eyes, there was something hidden there, something calculating. "Micah," he said, using my first name. My stomach dropped. As far as I knew, only Williams knew that name here. I kept my face neutral, masking my unease. "What's the mission, sir?" Jake's smile didn't falter, but his words danced around my question. "We'll need you and Vasquez for an operation. It's already cleared with Williams." "What operation?" I pressed, my tone steady despite the growing knot in my chest. "I need specifics to allocate personnel." "Just you and Vasquez," he replied, the smile never leaving his face. "These gentlemen will fill you in." Jake stood, giving me a fist bump that felt more like a shove into the unknown. As he walked out, I caught a glimpse of something dark flickering in his expression. I was left alone with the 2 men. The air in the room felt heavier, the shadows darker. "What's this really about?" I asked, my voice low. One of the men stepped forward, his face grim. "The beast wasn't the only one," he said. "There are others." Jake's words echoed in my head as I stood on the helipad at 1900, the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the sky with streaks of blood orange and deep violet. "Trust him entirely. Ensure he comes back in one piece." Williams' parting comment wouldn't leave me alone. It wasn't just an order. It felt like a warning. Why would a Spec Ops commander need to tell me to trust a CIA operative? We were supposed to be on the same team, weren't we? The Black Hawk's rotors whipped the air, sending waves of hot desert wind in every direction. The pilot, John, gave me a quick nod as I climbed aboard, his calm demeanor somehow grounding amidst the chaos. I'd flown with him before, after the nightmare with the giant. He was one of the few people I trusted out here. Jake was already strapped in, his expression unreadable under the low light. Vasquez sat opposite me, his face tense, jaw clenched. Neither of us spoke as the helicopter lifted, slicing through the cool night air like a ghost. There was something strangely comforting about flying in a Black Hawk, the hum of the rotors drowning out the world. But this mission felt different. Wrong. The engineers with us, quiet, unassuming, dressed like they belonged in an office rather than a war zone, only added to the unease. For an hour, we flew low, skimming the treetops and weaving through canyons like a needle through fabric. John was a master in the sky, guiding the bird with a precision that bordered on art. But no matter how smooth the ride, the tension in the cabin was palpable. Finally, Jake leaned forward, his voice steady yet cold. "Right here. Put it down above that cave." The Black Hawk descended with surgical precision, its rotors sending dust and leaves spiraling into the air. As soon as we touched down, Vasquez and I split, moving in opposite directions to secure the perimeter. The forest was eerily quiet, The kind of silence that made your skin crawl. One of the engineers stepped out, carrying a small robot. It looked like something a bomb squad would use back in the States, its mechanical limbs whirring softly as it moved. The crate it carried was filled with strange orb-like devices, each one tangled with intricate wiring. "What the hell are those?" I muttered to Vasquez, keeping my eyes on the tree line. "Beats me," he replied, his voice barely audible. "This whole thing feels off." The robot disappeared into the cave, its movements deliberate, almost cautious. Minutes later, it returned empty-handed. Without a word, the engineers loaded it back onto the Black Hawk, and we were airborne again. For hours, we repeated the process, dropping orbs, sending robots into caves, and flying off into the night. No one explained what the orbs were or what they were doing. The engineers monitored their computers obsessively, but Vasquez and I weren't allowed to see the screens. The silence was maddening. "What the hell is going on?" Vasquez finally snapped after another night of monotonous missions. "We're spec ops, not delivery boys. What are these things?" Jake didn't answer. He never did. The mission stretched on for weeks, the routine becoming more surreal with each passing night. The forests and mountains began to feel alive, as if they were watching us. And the orbs, whatever they were, seemed to pulse faintly under the moonlight, like they were alive. One night, as we prepared to drop another set of orbs, I caught movement in the tree line. My heart stopped. Something, or someone, was watching us. I gripped my weapon tightly, scanning the darkness. But whatever was had vanished. "Did you see that?" I whispered to Vasquez. "See what?" "I don't know," I admitted, my voice trembling. "But it's out there." He didn't respond, but the look in his eyes told me he felt it too. The forest wasn't just alive, it was awake. The elder's voice grew quieter as he began his tale, his eyes distant as though reliving every moment. Jake translated softly, his tone reverent, as if the story held a weight far beyond what was being said. "When I was a young man, about 15, the elder began, his gnarled hands gripping the edge of the table. I thought the elder's stories about the beast were just tales to frighten children. I had never seen it, never heard its cries in the night. So, two of my friends and I decided to prove them wrong. Vasquez and I exchanged uneasy glances. Jake's face remained stoic, his focus entirely on the elder. We waited until the moon was full, its light turning the mountains to silver. That night, the village was silent, but my friends and I were foolish and curious. We crept out with nothing but a lantern and our father's old rifles. We laughed at our own bravery as we made our way toward the hills where the beast was said to roam. The elder's voice faltered, his eyes clouding with something I could only describe as fear. Jake paused his translation, his lips pressed into a thin line. "What happened next?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The elder took a deep breath, his knuckles whitening as his grip on the table tightened. "We found it. Or rather, it found us." The room seemed to grow colder as he continued. The first thing we noticed was a smell, like rotting meat and sulfur. It came from everywhere and nowhere. Then the shadows shifted, and I saw its eyes. Red, like embers, burning through the darkness. It moved faster than anything I had ever seen, a blur of fur, claws, and teeth. He paused, trembling. It wasn't just an animal. It was something else, something ancient. It stood taller than any man, with limbs too long and a mouth full of jagged teeth that gleamed in the moonlight. When it roared, it was like the mountains themselves were screaming. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just a campfire story. It was something the elder had lived. "We ran," he continued, his voice shaking, "but it followed. One of my friends was the fastest among us, but he was the first to fall. The beast caught him, its claws ripping through him, as if he were nothing. The screams... I'll never forget the screams." The elder fell silent, his head bowed. Jake's hand rested gently on his shoulder. We were warned. Jake translated, his voice low. The beast isn't something that can be killed or reasoned with. It's not a predator. It's a guardian. It protects the caves, and those who trespass pay the price. I stared at the elder, trying to process what I just heard. A guardian? I asked. Protecting what? The elder looked at me, his eyes piercing. Secrets. Old ones. Things that should remain buried. Jake leaned back, his expression unreadable. Think about what we've been doing, he said. Mapping the caves, pushing deeper into places no one's been before. It's not just about finding terrace or strategic ground. There's something else in those caves. I glanced at Vasquez, who looked as uneasy as I felt. You're saying this beast, is tied to what we've been doing? Jake nodded. That's exactly what I'm saying. And if we're not careful, we're going to wake up something we're not ready for. The elder stood, his voice firm despite his trembling hands. You've seen the signs. Leave the caves be, or the beast will come for you too. We left the village in silence, the elder's warnings hanging over us like a dark cloud. Jake's earlier confidence seemed shaken, his usual smirk replaced by a grim frown. For the first time, I began to wonder if we were meddling with forces far beyond our understanding, and if we'd already gone too far to stop. David gestures toward the staircase, his face a mix of amusement and secrecy. Welcome to the real Exodus, he says, motioning for us to follow him. Vasquez and I exchange uneasy glances, but we descend without hesitation. The air grows colder as we move deeper underground, the walls narrowing and lit only by dim, flickering lights. The faint hum of machinery reverberates through the passageway, a sound that feels both comforting and unnerving. At the bottom, we find ourselves in a large, cavernous room. Monitors line the walls, displaying maps, live video feeds, and streams of incomprehensible data. Soldiers, engineers, and analysts bustle about, their movements deliberate and urgent. This, David says, spreading his arms, is what we've been working toward. In the center of the room is a massive table, holographic projections of Afghanistan's terrain shimmering above it. Red and green dots pepper the map, marking locations we'd visited during our orb-dropping missions. What the hell is all this? I ask, unable to hide my confusion. David grins. A culmination of everything Jake's team has been working on. Those orbs you and Vasquez helped deploy? They weren't just mapping caves. They've been scanning for something unusual. Unusual how? Vasquez asks, stepping closer to the table. David hesitates, then says, let's just say they weren't designed to detect terrorists or weapons. They were looking for anomalies. I feel a chill run down my spine. Anomalies? Before David can answer, a deep voice echoes from behind us. Things that don't belong in our world. We turn to see Jake walking in, his usual calm demeanor replaced with something more intense. He's holding a file, which he tosses onto the table. It slides open, revealing grainy black and white photos of strange symbols etched into rock walls, blurry images of towering figures, and the unmistakable outline of a giant footprint. What you heard from Asadi wasn't just a story, Jake says, looking directly at me. The beast he spoke of, the one we killed, was just the tip of the iceberg. What are you saying? Vasquez asks, his voice tense. Jake leans over the table, his eyes scanning the holographic map. There's more out there. Creatures, relics, places that defy logic and science. We've been mapping the caves to uncover their locations and figure out what the hell is going on. I stare at him, my mind racing. And you think these things are a threat? Jake nods solemnly. A big one. Whatever's hiding in those caves doesn't want to be found, but we're already on their radar. The beast that attacked Asadi's village wasn't just a random encounter. It was a warning. The room falls silent, the weight of his words sinking in. David breaks the tension with a smirk. Good news is, you two are officially part of the team now. Bad news? Things are about to get a hell of a lot weirder. I glance at Vasquez, who looks just as unsettled as I feel. Jake claps me on the shoulder, his expression softening. Welcome to Exodus. Now, let's get to work. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension, and I could feel every set of eyes on me. Task Force Sam? Kill real evil? The words echoed in my mind, raising more questions than answers. Williams motioned for me to sit, his expression unreadable. I hesitated for a moment before taking the empty seat beside Vasquez, who gave me a grin like this was just another day at the office. Task Force Sam, Williams began, isn't your standard Black Ops team. Our mission is classified above top secret, and what we deal with, well, it doesn't exist as far as the public is concerned. He gestured toward the corkboards covered in pictures of creatures that looked ripped straight from myths and nightmares, giants, winged beings, and other forms I couldn't even begin to describe. These are the Nephilim, Williams continued, pointing at a grainy photo of a massive, humanoid figure. You've already encountered one. Congratulations, you survived. Most people don't. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the monitors. I glanced at Vasquez, who was uncharacteristically serious now. And those, Williams said, moving to another board, are what we call the Watchers, fallen angels, the ones that started this whole mess. They were cast out, but their influence lingers. They've been manipulating humanity for centuries, breeding these Nephilim, and creating chaos wherever they can. I raise my hand, feeling ridiculous but needing clarity. Wait, are you saying angels and giants are real? William smirked, but it wasn't a kind one. You've seen the evidence yourself, soldier. Do you really think all those ancient myths and legends came from nowhere? The Nephilim and the Watchers are as real as you and me, and they're dangerous. He clicked the remote, and the TV screen behind him lit up with footage, grainy black and white videos of towering figures ripping through military outposts, glowing eyes in dark caves, and strange symbols carved into ancient stone walls. Our mission, Williams said, pacing now, is to locate, neutralize, and contain these threats. Some we can kill. Others, he paused, his gaze darkening. Well, we do our best. Another man at the table, a grizzled Canadian commando, spoke up. The stakes are simple. If we don't stop them, they'll destroy everything. This isn't just a war for land or power. It's a war for humanity's survival. I felt a lump in my throat. This was beyond anything I'd ever imagined when I joined the military. It wasn't just terrorists or rogue states. It was monsters, literal monsters, straight out of ancient nightmares. Williams turned back to me, his eyes boring into mine. You've proven yourself capable and, more importantly, trustworthy. The question now is, are you ready to join the fight? For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for my answer. I glanced at the images of the Nephilim, the Watchers, and the devastation they had caused. Then at the faces around the table, men and women who had seen and survived things that defied explanation. I took a deep breath, my hands clenched into fists. I'm in. Williams nodded, a hint of approval in his expression. Good. Welcome to Task Force Sam. Your real work starts now.